I'm Amanda Carter. And if you had told me a year ago that I'd be standing in that cold conference room, heart pounding, hands clenched in my lap, waiting for the words that would end 20 years of loyalty, I wouldn't have believed you. I walked into that meeting thinking it was about my promotion. 20 years of late nights, weekends lost, sacrifices made. I thought today was going to be the day they finally recognized it. Instead, I sat there under the bright artificial lights, staring at the polished table, while the new CEO, Martin Hale, shuffled papers like he was reading off a grocery list. He didn't even look me in the eye when he said it. Amanda, we're moving in a different direction. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. I swear for a moment, I couldn't even process the words. It felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. 20 years. Gone. Not even a thank you. Not even an apology. Just cold, detached efficiency, like cutting me loose was nothing more than ticking off a box on some checklist. Martin leaned back in his chair like the conversation was already over. Beside him, the HR rep gave me that rehearsed, pitying smile, sliding a folder across the table like a funeral program, severance package, benefits information. They'd even pre-booked my exit interview. I sat there, perfectly still, my fingers laced tightly together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand how they could just erase everything I'd built. But instead, I found myself swallowing it all down. Because in that moment, I realized something far worse than anger. In 20 years, I had never felt so invisible. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Martin shifted uncomfortably, tapping his pen against the folder like he was waiting for me to make this easier for him. And maybe, in some twisted way, I did. I nodded. Just a small, quiet nod. I stood up, smoothed down the front of my jacket with hands that barely trembled, and said, I understand. That was it. No begging, no fighting, no scene. I just picked up my dignity, packed it neatly around the pieces of my broken heart, and walked out. As I moved down the long hallway toward my office, the same hallway where I'd once stayed late to coach new hires, where I'd celebrated wins and fought for this company like it was my own, something unexpected stirred beneath the hurt. A quiet, simmering certainty. They thought they were ending something today, but they had no idea. This was just the beginning. It's strange. The things that flash through your mind when everything you've built is suddenly ripped away. As I packed up my office that afternoon, I kept thinking about the very first day I walked through those doors. Back then, the company wasn't some polished corporate giant. It was 5 of us, crammed into a converted loft with leaky windows and second-hand desks. I was 26, fresh out of college, full of ideas and way too much caffeine. I still remember the way my heart raced when I signed that first contract. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to be part of something real, something I could help shape from the ground up. I threw myself into it completely. Late nights turned into early mornings. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, even my own sister's wedding because there was always some urgent deadline, some crisis that needed fixing. And every time, I told myself it was worth it. That building something meaningful took sacrifice. That loyalty would matter in the end. I wasn't alone either. There was Eric, the quiet graphic designer who used to bring me coffee when we pulled all-nighters on client pitches. He was fresh out of art school, unsure of himself. I spent hours sitting beside him, helping him understand client briefs, teaching him how to defend his ideas without losing his voice. And there was Mia, our account manager, who once broke down in tears after losing a major client. I talked her off the ledge, stayed late to help her rebuild the proposal from scratch, and watched her become one of the sharpest, toughest negotiators I've ever known. I wasn't just clocking in and out every day. I was investing pieces of myself into this place, into these people. I believed in what we were building together. I believed it mattered. There were a lot of sacrifices along the way. I lost touch with friends. I missed watching my nieces grow up. I put off trips, hobbies, dreams, always telling myself there would be time for that later. Later, when the company was stable. Later, when I wasn't needed so badly. But later never really came. Because there was always another goalpost, always another fire to put out. And every time I thought about stepping back, I'd get another thank you card from a junior employee I'd mentored. Another late-night email from a client trusting me with something critical. Another reminder that somehow my work still mattered. Looking around that office, filled with years of awards, photos from company retreats, hand-drawn thank you notes tacked to my bulletin board, it hit me all at once. I wasn't just an employee, I was part of the company's DNA, and yet, to them, I was disposable. A line item to be erased with the stroke of a pen. I should have felt defeated, but instead, somewhere deep under the ache, I felt something else sparking to life. They might have forgotten who built the foundation they were standing on, but I hadn't. The first few days after I left felt like I was moving through a fog. I kept waking up at 6 a.m. out of habit, reaching for a work phone that was no longer mine. Everything felt hollow, like I'd been cut loose from something that used to define me. I told myself I'd take a few weeks to figure things out. Rest, maybe. But the universe had other plans. It was Mia who reached out first. A simple text. Coffee? Need to catch up. I almost said no. Part of me didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to say the words out loud and make it more real. But something in her message felt different, urgent, but kind. So I said yes. We met at the little coffee shop we used to sneak away to during crazy deadlines. When I walked in, Eric was already there too, waving me over. It felt surreal, like stepping back into a part of my life I wasn't sure I still belonged to. They didn't waste time on small talk. Mia leaned across the table and said, "We've been waiting for you." I blinked at her, confused. Eric nodded. "We've been planning something. For months now, honestly. We didn't want to say anything while you were still at the company, but we want to start our own firm. Our way. No corporate nonsense. Real relationships. Real work." Mia smiled, but there was a seriousness in her eyes. "We want you with us, Amanda. Not just as an employee, as a partner." The words landed heavier than I expected. A partner. Not a replaceable cog. Not a relic to be cast aside when the winds changed. A partner. Still, I hesitated. I looked at them, so sure, so excited. And I felt the old doubts creeping in. I was 48. I had built my career playing by the rules. Was I really ready to start over? What if I failed? What if loyalty, all the sacrifices I made, really had been a lie all along? That night, after the meeting, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at a cardboard box full of old office junk I hadn't unpacked yet. I dug through it absent-mindedly until my fingers brushed against a framed photo. It was taken in the early days, before the company grew into something unrecognizable. We were all there, crowded together on that tiny balcony, holding cheap paper cups and laughing like we had the whole world ahead of us. Back when we believed in what we were building. Back when it felt like it mattered. I traced my thumb over the faces in the photo. Some of those people had moved on. Some had been pushed out, just like me. But one thing was clear. I wasn't just along for the ride. I was part of the foundation. They could take the title. They could take the office. But they couldn't take that away from me. Maybe they pushed me. But I get to choose where I land. Starting the new company felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with nothing but blind faith beneath my feet. We didn't have fancy offices or a polished website yet. It was just me, Mia, Eric, and a rented co-working space that smelled faintly like burnt coffee and fresh paint. But for the first time in a long time, it actually felt like ours. We called it Haven Strategies, a place where relationships came first, where people mattered more than buzzwords and quarterly targets. Quietly, carefully, we started putting the pieces together. Business licenses, branding, late-night brainstorming sessions over cheap takeout. It was messy and exhausting, and it was the most alive I'd felt in years. We didn't advertise. We didn't send out announcements. We wanted to build it the right way, from trust, not desperation. And at first, we figured it would take months, maybe even years, to get our first real clients. But then, something unexpected started happening. My phone buzzed one morning as I was sorting through vendor quotes. It was a message from Dan, the VP of marketing at one of my old accounts. Just one line. "Heard you're doing something new. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long moment, not sure if I was imagining things. But before I could even answer, another message came in. And another. A week later, I had 5 different clients, old relationships I'd built over the years, reaching out. No sales pitch, no pressure, just quiet, steady trust. I hadn't solicited anyone. I couldn't. I wouldn't. But somehow, they found their way to me anyway. They remembered who built the bridge, not who owned the road. And it wasn't just the clients. It was the people, too. One by one, former coworkers started showing up. Some called, some emailed, some just dropped by the co-working space unannounced, coffee in hand, hope in their eyes. They weren't looking for a paycheck. They were looking for a place where they mattered again. Meanwhile, the company I'd left behind, they weren't taking it so well. I started hearing stories through the grapevine, mass emails begging clients for loyalty, flashy LinkedIn posts about exciting new leadership, desperate attempts to rebrand what was clearly a growing exodus. And, maybe a few months ago, I would have felt a little guilty watching it unfold. But now, I just felt sad. Sad that they didn't understand. You can't treat people like commodities and expect them to stick around when things get tough. Tension was building everywhere. Clients were pulling back on contracts, asking tougher questions. Employees were quietly updating their resumes. It was like watching a dam crack, slow at first, then faster, little by little. And then, the dam broke. It happened on a Tuesday morning, just as I was refilling my coffee. An email popped up on my screen from one of our biggest former clients. Subject line: Haven Strategies, New Partner Agreement. I opened it, heart racing. It was a formal offer. They wanted to move their entire account to us. No conditions, no hesitation, just trust. I sat there for a moment, staring at the words, letting it sink in. All the fear, all the doubt, all the sleepless nights wondering if I was crazy to start over at 48. It all faded away in that instant. We had our first major client. We weren't just surviving. We were building something real. And deep. Down, I knew. This was only the beginning. News travels fast in a small industry, faster than I thought possible. Within a week of landing our first major client, word started getting around. Not just whispers anymore, full-on conversations, happening behind closed doors. Meetings called. Panic rising. Then, like clockwork, the statement came. The CEO, Martin, posted this long, polished announcement on LinkedIn. I didn't even have to look for it. People sent it to me. In it, he talked about how the company was moving away from outdated methods and embracing bold new leadership for a digital future. He didn't mention me by name, of course. But the message was loud and clear. Relationships, trust, loyalty, all old news. All relics of a time the company was apparently happy to leave behind. I sat there, reading those words over and over, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I should have been angry. Part of me wanted to be. But mostly, I just felt sad. Sad for the place that had once felt like home. Sad for the people who still work there, watching everything they believed in get dismissed like it never mattered. At first, the company tried to put on a brave face. Flashy ads, hiring blitzes, big promises about innovation. But the cracks were already too deep. Clients started pulling out quietly at first, scaling back contracts, asking for exit clauses. Then the bigger ones followed, one after another, like dominoes falling in slow motion. I heard through the grapevine that the layoffs started about a month later. Good people, hard-working people, people who had poured their hearts into the company, just like I had, let go without ceremony, without thanks, just like me. And even though I wasn't there anymore, it still stung, because I remembered what it used to feel like, walking into that office with pride, believing we were building something that mattered. Watching it all fall apart wasn't satisfying. It wasn't sweet. It was sad. They threw away the very thing that made them strong. Meanwhile, at Haven Strategies, we kept our heads down. We weren't shouting from the rooftops or dancing on anyone's grave. We were working, quietly building something different, something real. Clients came to us because they wanted stability. They wanted to be seen, to be heard, to know that the people managing their brands actually cared about their success. And little by little, client by client, we started to grow. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't easy. Some nights I lay awake, still wondering if it would all fall apart. But every morning, when I walked into that small, scrappy office full of people who actually believed in what we were doing, I knew we were building something that couldn't be taken away with a memo or a rebrand. Something that mattered. 6 months passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Haven Strategies wasn't just surviving anymore. We were thriving. New clients, new team members, a growing sense of community that you could actually feel when you walked through the door. It wasn't perfect. There were still late nights and growing pains. But every challenge we faced felt worth it, because we were building it together, brick by brick, hand in hand. One rainy Thursday afternoon, just as I was wrapping up, a client call, the front desk buzzed me. "There's someone here asking for you," they said. "Says her name's Lauren Price?" I froze for a second, the name pulling up memories I hadn't visited in a while. Lauren. She was the one they'd brought in after I left. Young, ambitious, all the right buzzwords on her resume. I hadn't thought about her much since I walked away. Curious, I told them to send her in. Lauren looked different than I remembered. A little older, a little more tired around the edges. She clutched a coffee cup like it was a lifeline and offered me a tentative smile as she stepped into my office. "Thanks for seeing me," she said, her voice softer than I expected. I nodded, waiting. She hesitated, then blurted it out. "I'm not here to ask for a job. I need some advice." She sank into the chair across from me and started talking about how the company she thought she was joining wasn't the one she found when she got there, about the broken promises, the toxic politics, the clients who didn't trust her because they didn't trust the company anymore, about how she realized, too late, that she'd been handed something she didn't know how to hold on to because no one had taught her how to build it in the first place. I listened quietly, letting her get it all out. She wasn't making excuses. She wasn't looking for pity. She was just being honest, in the raw, painful way that only happens when all the gloss and ego are stripped away. When she finally fell silent, I leaned back in my chair and studied her for a moment. The future didn't belong to those who shouted the loudest. It belonged to those who built something real. And maybe, just maybe, Lauren was ready to start learning how to do that. I smiled, a real, genuine smile, and said, "Let's grab some coffee. I think we have a lot to talk about." As she smiled back, a little relief flickering in her eyes, I realized something important. I didn't need revenge. I built a better world instead. And it was just the beginning. If you've ever been pushed out, if you've ever had the ground pulled out from under you when you least expected it, I just want you to know it's not the end. I know it feels like it in the moment, like everything you built, everything you sacrificed, was for nothing. But sometimes, being forced out isn't a failure. Sometimes, it's life's way of pushing you toward the place you were meant to be all along. It doesn't happen overnight. It's messy and scary, and there are days when you'll question everything. But if you keep going, if you trust in what you built, in who you are, you'll find your way. You'll realize that your value was never tied to a title or a company name. It's something no one can take away from you. I'd love to hear your story too. If you've ever had to start over, if you've ever taken a leap you didn't think you were ready for, leave a comment. Let's support each other. Because sometimes the people who understand you best are the ones who've walked the same broken road and found a new beginning on the other side. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope, in some small way, it reminds you that even when everything feels like it's falling apart, you might just be falling into place. And if this story touched you, helped you feel a little less alone, or just made you think, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these moments with you. Thanks for listening, truly.